Mr. Klain's departure would mark a rare moment of high-level turnover in an administration that has been remarkably stable through 2 years of crises and political battles. Ron Klain takes pride that he lasted longer than any other Democratic president's first chief of staff in more than half a century. Credit. Doug Mills, The New York Times, Washington. Ron Klain, the White House chief of staff, who has steered President Biden's administration through 2 years of triumphs and setbacks, is expected to step down in coming weeks in the most significant changing of the guard since Mr. Biden took office 2 years ago. Mr. Klain has been telling colleagues privately since the November midterm elections that after a grueling, non-stop stretch at Mr. Biden's side going back to the 2020 campaign, he is ready to move on, according to senior administration officials, and a search for a replacement has been underway. The officials, who discussed internal matters on condition of anonymity, would not say whether a successor has already been picked or when the decision would be announced, but indicated that it would come at some point after the president outlined his agenda for the coming year, in his State of the Union address on February 7. Mr. Klain likely would stay around for a transition period to help the next chief settle into the corner office that has been his command post for many crises and legislative battles. His resignation would be a striking moment of turnover at the top of an administration that has been relatively stable through the first half of Mr. Biden's term, and Mr. Klain takes pride that he has lasted longer than any other Democratic president's first chief of staff in more than half a century. But with Mr. Biden expected to announce by spring that he is running for re-election, advisors predict more moves as some aides shift from the White House to the campaign. The departure would also come at a time when the White House faces a widening array of political and legal threats from a newly appointed special counsel investigating the improper handling of classified documents and a flurry of other inquiries by the newly installed Republican majority in the House. The next chief of staff will be charged with managing the defense of Mr. Biden's White House and any counterattack as the 2024 election approaches. Among the possible choices to replace Mr. Klain mentioned by senior officials are Labor Secretary Martin J. Walsh, former Governor Jack A. Markle of Delaware, now serving as ambassador to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Anita Dunn, a senior advisor to Mr. Biden, Stephen J. Richetti, the counselor to the president, Jeffrey D. Zients, the administration's former coronavirus response coordinator, Susan Rice, the White House domestic policy advisor, and Tom Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture. Neither Mr. Klain nor any of those named as possible candidates to succeed him had any immediate comment on Saturday in response to messages. Ms. Dunn has flatly ruled out taking the job in conversations with colleagues. Mr. Klain has been a singularly important figure in Mr. Biden's administration. Having worked for Mr. Biden off and on for more than 3 decades, admirers say that Mr. Klain channels the president as few others can. He is seen as so influential that Republicans derisively call him a virtual prime minister and Democrats blame him when they are disappointed in a decision. For all the crossfire, Mr. Klain helped track up an impressive string of legislative victories, including a $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief plan, a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure program, the largest investment in combating climate change in history, and measures to expand benefits for veterans exposed to toxics burn pits, lower prescription drug costs for seniors, spur development in the semiconductor industry and create a minimum 15% tax rate for major corporations. Mr. Klain also helped oversee the distribution of vaccines that have curbed if not ended the COVID-19 pandemic and the enactment of a plan to forgive hundreds of billions of dollars of student loan debt for millions of Americans. And he set the tone for the White House message to the world through an active Twitter account that he used to promote victories and jab critics. On Friday, for instance, he chided Republicans for their approach to federal spending. How extreme is the House GOP plan to cut Social Security and Medicare? He wrote. So extreme that even Donald Trump is saying, hey, that's too extreme for me. He also reflected on the second anniversary of Mr. Biden's inauguration. 2 hard years, Mr. Klain wrote. So much to be done.